Hey there, Organizedpreneur family. Welcome back to another episode of the Organizedpreneur Podcast, the Launchpad. This is where we talk all things strategy, systems, and streamlining of your business and your podcast. I'm here to help you turn your calling into content that changes lives. So today, on this particular episode, this was actually sparked by a conversation I recently had with my friend and sister, Dorothy, and so we were having a conversation the other day, and so in the conversation she asked the question. She said, "Why is everybody starting a podcast? There just seems to be like everybody's starting a podcast." And so and it wasn't a random thing. We were having conversation around other things that led to that question. Okay, so it wasn't just random. But so I texted her and I told her, I said, "You know what? You gave me an idea for another episode." So and so if you're listening to this episode and maybe you've thought the same thing, or maybe you wondered, why is everybody starting a podcast? Like everywhere I look, somebody's starting a podcast. Like when I look on social media, somebody's saying that they're starting a podcast. If I look, in my email, somebody's starting a podcast. Why is everybody starting a podcast? Why has podcasting exploded so much? If you're asking yourself that question, then you are not alone. So in this episode, we're going to break it all down. Why has podcasting become so popular? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the real numbers behind the boom and what it means for you as a business owner or content creator or entrepreneur. What does that mean for you? Now, I wished I could say that this was the first time that I talked about this topic. It's not. I've talked about it in different, settings and master classes and things like that. But this was the first time I was asked this question directly, like, what is happening here? Okay, so if you are ready to get the inside scoop on the podcasting boom, then just hang tight. I want you to just hang tight. We're going to dive in. All right. So we're going to talk about first, what do the numbers say? Are the numbers reflecting the fact that there's a huge podcasting boom? What are the numbers saying? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about not just why is it exploding. We're going to talk about the numbers, but we're also going to talk about why is it exploding? Why is podcasting exploding? And we're going to talk about, is it too saturated? Because I get that question too. Should you even start a podcast? It just seems like it's so saturated, right? And we're going to talk about the future of podcasting and how you can stand out. All right, let's dive in. So, why is everybody starting a podcast? What do the numbers say? Let's just start with the stats, the facts, right? So, how many podcasts are actually out there? Is it really crowded? Is it really, are there really as many podcasts as people are saying that there are? Well, here are the stats. As of 2025, there are approximately 3.5 million podcasts available. Yes, 3.5 million. That's a big number. But here's the interesting fact. Out of those 3.5 million podcasts, only 400,000 are actively publishing new episodes. That's interesting, isn't it? That means there's a huge percentage of podcasts that are inactive or abandoned. Now, here are a couple of other stats that might be of interest to you. The global podcast audience has grown 546.7 million listeners in 2024, and that's an increase of 8% from the previous year to 2023, right? The podcast industry is projected to be worth $17.59 billion by 2030. So, is podcasting popular? You bet. But does that mean it's too crowded? Not necessarily. And I'll explain why in just a minute. And I always like to give you a little bit of my background, and I've shared this many times before, and I think this is going to be really significant to the topic that we're covering now, because I've shared with you, if you've been listening to me at any point in time, you'll know that I've launched 3 podcasts, right? The first podcast I launched was in 2013. That podcast has 14 episodes. That's it. 14 episodes. I actually have, it's actually on YouTube, right? And the name of the podcast is Organize Your Enterprise. It has 14 episodes based on some of the stuff that I share in my content, whether it's a masterclass or even on my podcast when I'm talking about that topic of podcasting, right? But we're gonna get into that in just a little bit. But that first podcast only has 14 episodes. I thought it was 12, but it's 14. Okay. The second podcast I launched with my business partner who asked me this question. And we didn't start out looking to launch a podcast. So let me explain, right? Let me explain. We didn't start out by looking to launch a podcast. We actually repurposed a live call that we were having, and we repurposed it into a podcast. And so we have, I think it's almost 400 episodes. I mean, we were really killing it, right? Like 5 days a week was, a new episode, 15-minute episode. So if you're looking, if you want to, check that out, go to wisdominspired.com. I think or wisdominspired.net. Anyway, I'll put the link in the show notes where you can check it out. All right. So it's me and her. And so now this current podcast, is called Organizedpreneur Podcast Launchpad, right? So I'm now on my 100 and maybe 40 plus episode. It's about 2 years old now. This is the current podcast. And so I said all that to say it took me a little bit of learning to get to the point where I had episodes that were consistent, and I was more serious about podcasting, and that's what I teach in my podcasting classes, and even on this podcast, I teach you how to launch, right? So anyway, I wanted to make sure that I said that just so that you have a little bit more background, just in case this is your first time listening to my podcast, and just in case Dorothy is listening to this episode, right? So, because I told her I was going to create an episode out of our conversation. Not everything, because you don't need to know everything. All right. Okay. So why is podcasting exploding? What's fueling this massive growth? And there are a few reasons why more people, more than ever, are really, they're hitting that record button and launching their own podcast. I can tell you that from my own clients. They are hitting that record button and launching their podcast. Um, Most of my clients are female um, entrepreneurs, and they're on a mission. Okay, but that's like the foundation of it, right? Because you really need to start a podcast, not just because you want to get behind the mic. You need to have a reason for wanting to launch a podcast, right? But why is podcasting exploding? So let me give you some reasons. Number one, it is easier than ever to start a podcast. It used to be complex, but it's easier than ever to start a podcast, right? And I know a lot of people out there, there's like, they got a lot that they want to say and things like that. But it's easier to get your message out there now, okay? It's not as complex anymore. The recording, the editing, the hosting, the distribution used to require a lot of technical skills and expensive equipment. But today, not so much. And so you can use tools like Riverside, which is what I recommend for my clients, Spotify for podcasters. And anyone can start a podcast, most of the time for free. So that's the other reason. People have things that they want to say, and there is a lot of noise out there. But it's easier than ever to start a podcast. You can, get an affordable mic. You don't have to have sophisticated equipment. There's AI-powered transcription tools, automated editing software that have all made podcasting more accessible than ever. So that's one reason. It's easier than ever to start. Another reason is that people love consuming podcasts, especially while multitasking. So unlike blogs and videos where it requires like your full attention. Now, I'm not saying that, there's a lot of people that's really, consuming videos now. But unlike blogs or videos which require full attention, audio podcasts lets you learn or be entertained while doing other things like driving, cooking, working out, cleaning the house, all of those type of things. As a matter of fact, 74% of podcast listeners say they tune in while they're doing other things, other tasks. And that's a major reason why businesses and entrepreneurs and content creators are flocking to podcasts, because it meets people where they are, right? The next thing is that podcasting creates authority and builds community. Now, I know my business partner is I can't wait. As a matter of fact, I can't wait until I hear what she says about this episode, because I told her it was going to come out and all that. But it creates authority. It creates authority. When you have a podcast, you are no longer just someone with an opinion. She might disagree with me on that. But you are actually positioning yourself as an expert, a thought leader, and a voice people come to for guidance. As a matter of fact, people were actually listening to podcasts during the election. People were actually listening to podcasts more than they were watching the news. But podcasts have also become a greater or a deeper way to create connection. Or should I say it this way? It creates a deeper connection with an audience. more so than a blog or a social media post, ever could. Because people, they hear your voice, they hear your tone, your personality, and that makes the bond stronger. And so that's another reason why people are launching podcasts. That's why podcasting is exploding. Now, those are not the only reasons, but those are pretty much the gist of it, right? That's pretty much the main reasons why people are launching podcasts. It's another platform that allows you to create deeper connections with your audience, right? So let me move on to my next point. So, is podcasting too saturated? Should everybody start one? Is it too crowded? And so here's the truth. I would say that it's never too crowded if you bring something unique to the table. Yes, there are millions of podcasts, but just like the statistics I just shared with you, the vast majority of them just fade away because they lack consistency and focus and strategy. And so, which was the reason why my first podcast only has 14 episodes. Now, should everyone start a podcast? Nah, not really. And maybe I'll cover that on another episode, but I'm going to share with you why you should start a podcast. Why you should still start a podcast. And I'll share with you these 3 reasons why. Number 1, most podcasts don't last long. Okay? So, although there's a lot of podcasts out there, most of them don't last long. Even though they're easier to start than ever before, it requires dedication and commitment, and you have to have, a reason, a why. Just like in business, you gotta, it's gotta be more than just wanting to get behind the mic, right? And so that's the reason why most podcasts don't last long. As a matter of fact, about 90% of the podcasts don't make it past episode 10. Now, I made it to episode 14, but you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent, and it requires more than consistency. You got to be doing the right thing. You got to be sharing value, right? You got to have a why behind it. But most podcasts don't last long. Next, there's always room for fresh perspective. Even in a saturated market, new voices bring fresh ideas, new angles, and different experiences. And so your perspective is unique. Nobody can podcast exactly like you. Nobody can podcast exactly like me. I don't care if we're talking about the same topic, right? And then lastly, your business can benefit from it. Podcasting is one of the best ways to generate leads, visibility, and authority for your brand or business. So I say to you, if you're wondering why, or if you're thinking, okay, well, there's just a whole lot of noise out there, et cetera, think about some of these things I'm sharing with you. Instead of thinking, everybody's doing it, I'm too late, ask yourself, how can I bring my unique expertise to the table? Right? So, let's talk about the future of podcasting and how you can stand out. Because don't you want to know, right? Where is podcasting headed? So we're seeing more AI-powered tools that make podcasting easier, like auto transcription, smart editing, AI-generated show notes, things like that, like I just shared. Video podcasts are on the rise. Platforms like YouTube and Spotify, they're pushing out video content. making podcasts more interactive and engaging, right? And so this is where podcasting is headed. More businesses and personal brands will use podcasts as a lead generation tool, not just a hobby, not just a fun hobby or something to do. Although there's some out there that's doing that. Like, this is just, this is something that I want to do. As a matter of fact, even before 2013, when I launched my first podcast, it had been on my mind for some time, and podcasting it wasn't as popular as it is now. But I started it back then, not knowing exactly what I was doing. I knew there was something there. I knew I liked it, but the things that I am even sharing with you now and the things that I share, in terms of standing out and, the things that you should do and have in place to launch a podcast, which require more than just technical skills and, having a great voice or whatever. Even though I was actually told that, and that was something that I never forgot. It was told to me by someone who was in that space, and so I never forgot it. But that's not the only reason that I launched a podcast. I mean, I do have a mission. I do have a mission to help others start a podcast. I do have a mission to help others be and stay organized, right? And so, and I like to motivate people. I like to inspire people as well, to do these things. But I just think that there is a lot more behind it than just a mic, right? So how do you think, or what's going to help you stand out? Okay, there's some things that you really need to know. And so I'll just give you 3 for now, okay? Because there are many things that will help you stand out, but here are 3 things that will really help you to stand out and be discovered and get found, right? You need to have a clear niche. So if you want to start a podcast, let's just say you want to start a podcast and you don't know what your niche is, but you think, okay, I just want a podcast about business. In fact, when those 14 episodes, I just wanted to have a podcast about helping people to get organized. I did not niche down. Okay. So instead of a podcast about business or a podcast about, getting organized, you need to niche down. And instead think of it or rename it or think about your podcast as a podcast about productivity hacks for online entrepreneurs. Now, I got to tell you, if I had done that with my first podcast, thought about my niche, I would have more episodes than what I have now on that particular podcast. But I'm thankful for learning more about how to start a podcast. So a clear niche, just like a clear niche will help you in your business, it will help you in your podcasting. So that's number 1 for standing out. Consistency. People are waiting. So the most successful podcasts stick to a schedule, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And I got to tell you, my podcast, that's another reason why I only have 14 episodes on that podcast, because I was not consistent. And I was not consistent because I was not clear on my niche. It was too broad. And so I was struggling to be consistent. I was trying to always think about what am I going to talk about on the next episode? I don't know if I have enough content to share. I don't know if they already heard this already or whatever it is. I hadn't defined it. I wasn't clear about my niche. I was too broad. So that impacted my consistency, right? So clear niche, consistency. The last thing, you want to leverage SEO and social media. So you got to learn how to optimize your show with titles, descriptions, keywords, so your podcast gets discovered easily. Now, had I known some of this stuff way back then, I might have more than 14 episodes, right? And so hopefully this is very helpful to you. And I know my friend is not looking to launch a podcast, but hopefully this is helpful to you who's looking to launch your podcast. And I will say that if you're wanting a complete roadmap to launch your podcast, I would recommend you go and listen to episode 140, where I talk about the 5 pillars of podcasting. Okay? So, here are my final thoughts on this. Is podcasting too crowded? Nah. The industry is booming, but there's still plenty of room for voices that bring value, that bring personality, that bring consistency. And as long as you start it the right way, I think you'll be fine. If you have a mission, a vision, if this is something that God has put on you, put on your heart, and you know that, yeah, it's time to start a podcast. When people come to me, it's because they know in their knowing that God has placed on their heart to start a podcast. So if you've been thinking about launching a podcast, let this be your sign. It is not too late, but the key is to do it strategically, with a plan, and with a clear niche. So there you have it. Now, if you want help launching your podcast the right way with hands-on guidance, then I'm going to put the link in the show notes to go to bit.ly/new pod launch. And there you'll find more on the next Podcast Accelerator Bootcamp, where you can start your podcast in 3 days. So I'll drop that link in the show notes. So for now, thanks for joining me. And thanks for tuning in to the Organizedpreneur Podcast Launchpad. And if you loved this episode, then subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who needs to hear this. Until next time, keep organizing your business, your life, and your podcast. Have a blessed day.